Hey everyone, this is Build, and I'm your host, Brittany Jones Cooper. New York Times bestselling author Jason Reynolds joins us today to talk about his new book, Look Both Ways, A Tale Told in 10 Blocks, which is already on the short list for the National Book Awards for Young People's Literature. In his new work, Reynolds uses hilarious observations and tons of heart to explore themes of race, bullying, illness, and identity, all on the long walk home from school. Put your hands together for Jason Reynolds.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah. First, you just got the news that you were shortlisted. So when I wrote that intro, you were you were on the long list.
Yeah, it's happened like 45 minutes ago. Like 45 minutes ago. So it's cool. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you're fortunate to be longlisted. You're fortunate to be longlisted once. And so this is my second time as a finalist, and my third time as a longlister. And so I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. For people who maybe aren't as aware of what this award is, what does that sort of signifier mean in the literature community?
I mean, the easiest way to put it is this is the Oscars of literature. Right? This is the Grammys for us. You know, this is the top of the top. This means that your book has been considered top 5 greatest book of this year in this country, in my particular category. And so it's just, this is for writers, this is what we all are sort of aspiring toward, man.
And I have to say, I agree with the shortlisting because I read it last night, and it kind of goes through in a flash. I mean, your writing style is so conversational and accessible. And then the themes it explores for the age group it's written for are so deep and profound and so important. So I definitely understand the importance of your work, especially in this time. So take me through the beginning of this book, Look Both Ways. What was the idea for it?
So I'm interested in how do we talk about young people's autonomy. Usually when it comes to young folks' literature for children, we figure out ways to remove parents in some strange way, right? It's always like deus ex machina, some weird thing that happens. It's like, and now the parents happen to be on vacation without their 12-year-old child, or now the parents have been killed off for some strange reason in some, dystopian world, or Lord of the Flies, the children are stranded on an island with no adults. And I think all of that is sort of a cheat code. And so for me, I wanted to find the real space in which young people are actually not being supervised, which in an everyday life for the everyday kids in Brooklyn, kids in DC, kids in Harlem, kids in Houston, right? There's usually this 15-minute block on the walk home where they're alone and they're able to explore and experience the good, the bad, the ugly, and the interesting.
And so you split it up into 10 different parts. How did you decide what stories you wanted to tell, what themes that you wanted to tackle?
I mean, ultimately, I think I always am trying to show young people as themselves. Yeah. I didn't want, there's this thing where people are like, yo, your stories feel very normal, but that's because I think that there's so much magic in the mundane. Right? And I think sometimes we're looking for these massive plot points. An explosion happens, and it's like, no, if you pay attention to everyday life, there's a lot there that's funny, there's a lot there that's painful, just in the everyday goings-on of who we are on a daily basis. This is why comedians are such important figures in our lives, right? Because they can take sort of very small things and turn them on their heads, and you're like, I never thought about it that way, but it happens to me every single day. And so I knew that I wanted to write about things that I feel are actually affecting their lives. Small things like fear. Right? How frightening is it for an introverted kid to walk home from school? Right? What if they've never had that adventure or even had the responsibility of going 10 blocks down the street? That first time could be a bit frightening. Or what's it like to have friends? When I was a kid, I had me and my buddies, we walked, and that was our bonding moment. Like that's when we had time to sort of build this clubhouse friendship that we still have 30 years later, right? That's when we got into trouble. That's when we sort of expressed our fears and our concerns about who we were in the world, and we had each other to insulate one another, to build safety networks for each other as we got older, right? But all that happens in that pocket of time when there's no adult there to say, no, you can't say that, or you can't do that. It's like, well, I'm gonna say it and do it. And if it's wrong, my friends would be here to help me clean up this mess before my mama get home, right? And that's kind of how I approached it.
Yeah, it was instantly relatable for me too, because like you said, it's such a universal experience, a time I never really thought about. And then from grade school to middle school, I started recounting after school, and that's when I learned what a tampon was.
Exactly.
Like there's all this education that happens in that 30 minutes between school ending and going home. One chapter really deals with the low cuts, which I was really, really drawn to that chapter. And it deals with a group of kids who are all battling an illness at home with a parent with cancer. Why was that a theme that you wanted to explore?
I think, so I still feel like a kid. I'm an old kid who has had, both of my parents have had cancer. And I was young. I was 16 when it happened the first time. And I remember the feeling of wanting to take care of my folks, right? There's a strange shift in responsibility when you have a sick parent, because suddenly it goes from your parent taking care of you to you wanting to take care of your parent, even if you don't have all the resources or the know-how to do so. Children, you pour out to your parents when they're debilitated. All of the selfishness in a child suddenly dissipates when they believe that their parents need them, and we don't give them enough credit when it comes to this. And so the low cuts are just these kids who are trying to do right by their sick parents and are trying to survive the idea and the fear of what will happen if these parents don't get better. But they're seen as knuckleheads because young people will break rules for good reasons. And we don't often think about it that way. We just say the rules are the rules. We live in a bifurcated world of black and white, good and bad, when the truth is that most of us exist in the space of gray, especially young people who are trying to do something right without the resources to do it. And so desperate measures have to be taken.
And it just, I think, was another lesson in empathy. You never know what's going on in somebody's life. And I think especially for kids, they have to be reminded of that often because they're at a point where they're getting put in boxes and labels are becoming a thing. And so it's like to have that empathy for somebody else's journey is so important.
It's an amazing thing.
And the sooner you learn that, the better. Bullying is also kind of woven throughout. It's just so tough. You forget how hard it is for kids. How do you stay connected to that theme of bullying? Do you talk to kids? Do you interview them? Because it does feel, again, very relatable.
Yeah, I don't, for me, bullying is one of these things that I think we put it in this interesting category, right? Where we say bullying is this very special and specific thing that we have to attack. It's an ill of the world that we have to attack. Now, I agree with that, but I also believe that who we call haters are actually just human. It's a human thing. Right? It's rooted in human issues and human problems and human psyche and human trauma and human pressures. But we like to sort of separate it from its humanity and say it's a separate thing that we have to attack. And it's or we just have to think about humanity from a macro level, right? And what humanity actually is, the complexities of it, the nuances of it, and whether or not all of us are given the space to process the things that are happening around us. And if we're not, sometimes they show themselves as bullying, right? And so in these stories, I like to show for instance, there's the one about the young lady on the skateboard, right? And she's being bullied. But there's also a moment where we talk about what her bully has been through, right? And we never have that conversation. The bully also has a story. It doesn't mean that the bully should be excused, but it does mean, or that the bully should sort of be let off the hook in any way. But it does mean that we should start examining what makes a person who they are, and how that has effects on the world. That's all. It humanizes everybody.
Yeah, whether the bully's getting bullied at home or by another group of kids and they're taking out their aggression on somebody else.
Of course.
Again, you can always kind of connect those dots.
It's a redistribution. It always is.
It always is.
Yeah.
I also love there's a lot of fun parts too.
Of course.
And there is one of a young boy who wants to go ask a girl out, ask for her number. And to me, that felt wildly personal. So was that born out of something that you and your guys went through back in the day? Because it just felt so specific.
Yeah, it's a composite of those stories. Me and my friends and all of us, back when you did have to do that, when it was all about drumming up enough courage to ask someone for a phone number.
And getting enough lotion on the elbow.
And getting enough, I was thinking about that back there. I was like, I hope my elbow is on there.
That's all I think about when I come out here. I'm my legs are greased up because my mom will watch an interview. It's the only thing she'll notice.
Look at your knees.
It's your ankles are
How
ashy.
you on there looking, exactly, And I had one of those moms who would always make sure, she would put lotion on my earlobes, which I always found so strange. And she's you never know, And so, I grew up in this environment where that was a big deal, or we didn't like to stink. Right? And so the moment that I used to sneak into my mom's room, and she, I got an old school black mom, so she was wearing white diamonds, right? And I would sneak into her room, get the white diamonds perfume before I went to school, right? Right? And so all my friends would be yo, you smell good. And teachers you smell like a 50-year-old woman, right? But these are the things that sort of you do when you're trying to be impressive or when you want to, make yourself big, make yourself seen, right? But the best part about that particular tale is he builds up all the courage. And he asked this young lady for a phone number. But there's also the moment that she don't owe that to you. Just because you've done all the things, right? You've done all this prep work to make yourself seen, it does not mean that she is obligated to oblige. She's not. So what? And so now what? You've done all the things, and we don't know if she says yes or no, right? But there's this strange ambiguity there that says she may say no, and if she does, so what? She does not owe you her phone number just because you've done all this prep work on the back end, which is a very important thing that we have to talk about.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like no, I can say yes, 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 and when I say no, I
It's
mean
no.
no. That's
Yeah.
it. This is based in DC, or where's it
It doesn't say.
based? Okay,
It
because I
doesn't
wasn't
say.
sure where the street names came from.
So the interesting thing about the story is that so all the blocks are completely different terrains, right? So like you go to the right and you're walking through you're walking down Fulton Street, right? Like it's literally taken from Fulton Street. What Fulton Street in Brooklyn is like when you're walking down in the middle of the day, right? Hair shops, roti shops, right? All these sorts of things that we're all very used to if you live in that kind of environment. If you go to the left, super suburban. If you go across the street, you've got sort of an older neighborhood, maybe just outside of the city. If you go behind the school, there's like high-rise apartment buildings, right? And so every sort of route you take, they're all sort of completely different communities, all within the same community. And so I don't name it, for that reason.
Which is impactful because that's how life is, right? You go into school, but the kids all go home to different worlds
There you go.
sometimes. And I love that, especially with Simeon and
Yeah,
Kenzie,
right.
just their whole chapter, their whole journey home, and like where they were living and how they portrayed themselves at school.
My favorite.
Yeah, it just felt, again, I felt like I grew up with brothers, so it just felt really relatable in that
Secret
way.
handshakes.
Yeah,
And
right?
we have all the secret and
Intimacy is
the
just so
intimacies.
strong.
There's a secret I haven't. This is my first sort of interview talking about this book. So there's a secret about that story that I'm going to give away right here. This is exclusive. So there's a part in that story. The whole story is about their secret handshake, right? And how there's this long, elaborate. Because when we were growing up, it was like, yo, we got to have a secret handshake that no one else can do, and it's got to look super cool. And then you got a girlfriend. Me and my girlfriend got to have a secret handshake. Me and my mama got to have everybody. You know what I mean? And so there's a scene at the end where they finally do the handshake before they go separate ways, and it's super elaborate. And what the handshake actually is sign language. And what they're saying in that handshake is, I can hear you even when the world can't. And so that's what this story, this sort of friendship, this brotherhood. Now, you would never know that if I don't say it, unless you know sign language and I've described it well enough for you to see the signs and what they're doing. But that's what they're saying, right? And if you think about that in relationship to gang signs, if you think about that in relationship to all the other secret, that's really what we're trying to say, right? Is that I can see you, I can hear you, even when they can't see you and they can't hear you, right? I am my brother's keeper, right? I got you. Right, no matter what, and we're going to stand together and celebrate and hold each other down despite our environment and our experiences and circumstances.
Yeah, that is incredibly moving, knowing that, because again, this relationship is one that stood out to me. It's like this Robin Big sort of, they just like take care of each other. It's really beautiful, but knowing that extra layer, I think, again, just gives so much insight into your writing. What were you like in middle school?
A knucklehead. A knucklehead. Middle school was tough. Middle school was a funny time. My parents split. And so everything got really strange, and I was, you're going through all the emotional changes. You know what I mean? I'm smelling myself in multiple ways, right? There's smelling yourself actually smelling my body, and then there's smelling yourself like old ladies used to say, you smelling yourself, you feeling yourself, right? Like I felt like I was a man, even though I was like 11, and a very small 11 at that. But I felt the necessity to play the part of a bigger person, of an older person, which of course got me in trouble. You know what I mean? The feeling of wanting to present and posture as I saw my older brother do, who was at that time probably 18, 17, following his friends. And so so middle school was what the middle always is, right? You feel a sense of it's purgatorial in that way. You're not quite here and you're not quite there. You just kind of exist in the strange void. Trying to figure out what it means to be who you are. You're not grown yet, but you're not as young as you were when you were in the first and second grade. All of those things make for a really complicated time.
Is that why you enjoy writing about this period?
Oh man,
right? Just because there is so much complication, there's so many different paths and ways to navigate it.
It's great because they teeter, right? Yeah. I can ask the wildest questions if I frame it around a 12-year-old. You can say anything. If you frame it around a 12-year-old, right? But you can have it be as big as you want and as poignant or as sophisticated, as traumatic, as joyous. All those things exist within the mind and the psyche of a 12-year-old. And then you can literally dial it down and they can be in desperate need of a mother's hug. Yeah. in a way that like a 6-year-old is, right? Needed to be held by a mom or by a grandma or a father, right? Needing to be kissed by a parental figure or coached by a mentor, right? It's interesting because they can kind of slide back and forth seamlessly, and I think that makes for just a massive palette to work with.
Yeah. Would you explore with Cynthia? I think just sort of
Oh.
her need for attention, and
I love that one too.
I love that one.
I love that.
I related a lot to that one, just in
Cynthia.
like her mom being her hero and just all of that dynamic. Again, well done.
Well,
You
shout out to
you
Cynthia.
write so often. Do you get writer's block, or how do you combat that? Because I looked at you'll write like 2 or 3 books in a year.
That's gonna stop. That's,
Yeah. Okay. Really?
I'm
Is that exhausting?
tired. Like,
Yeah, you would have to be.
no, you know what? Writer's block is interesting. I'm cautious as to say that it doesn't exist because I don't want to be disrespectful to so many of my peers who have it. What I will say though is that I wonder if it only exists due to the insecurity that comes with the fear of writing badly, and I'm just not afraid to write trash. It doesn't scare me to write a messy first draft or an incoherent first draft, right? An unreadable first draft, because I have to have something to work with. You know, you can't fix what don't exist, right? I always say this: you got to put it on the page first, and then you can move it around and make it make sense to you. But you got to put it all down. And so I don't necessarily have writer's block because I just don't mind writing terrible, terrible language and literature until I can make it better.
Have you ever written something that didn't need like a deep edit?
Yeah.
You have. What was it?
Look both ways.
Oh, really?
Look both. What you have in your hand is really close to the first draft.
Wow.
Yeah, that rarely happens. To be
Right.
fair, just so I'm clear, rarely. That's a rarity. That almost never happens. But yeah, it was super clean when I turned it in.
Right. And is that just because the stories kind of felt familiar and they could write themselves, or just you were inspired by?
Honestly, I don't know if there's an answer to why it happens that way. I mean, it happened that way with that. It happened with the track series, with a few of the books in the track series. And then there are other books where I've had to rework 20 times. Long way down, I had to rewrite 25 times, you know what I mean? Just trying to figure out how to get the language right. And so I don't know why it goes that way. It's just every book is a different process. You know, my buddy Sharon Draper, one of my mentors, said, writing a novel is like climbing a mountain. You know, it's a massive mountain, Mount Everest, and you climb to the top and you say to yourself, I cannot believe that I made it to the top of this mountain. Now I know that I can climb a mountain. And you walk back down feeling proud of yourself because you know that when you get back to the base, you'll be able to climb that mountain again. But what you didn't know was that on your way down, all the footholds changed. So the route up the mountain again is a completely new route. So it's not the same, and it's still difficult, and it's still hard, right? And so I don't know why some books work sort of clean like that, and some others need a lot of reworking, because the mountain is always a new mountain.
I'm interested in your writing process too. What sort of do you do to get in that space? Do you write in the same place? Do you write at the same time of day? Do you meditate? Like, what do you sort of do to get in the right place?
I believe in muscle. I believe in muscle, right? Like, I believe if you were to ask if anyone in here is a singer, and we were to ask them to sing us a song, they would never say, I can't sing it until I put on my singing robe. I got to get to my singing room. I got to sit at my singing desk, right? It's like, no, you want to sing me a song? I'm going to sing you a song because it exists in here. It's a muscle, right? I believe that writing is the same way. I work hard to strengthen that muscle so that I can write on airplanes and hotel rooms, on trains and the backs of cabs. Wherever I need to get it done, I need to be able to tap into it. W.H. Auden said back in the day, before any of us were born, W.H. Auden, famous poet, said, to discipline your passion, one must discipline your time. And so I tried to keep a schedule and work from 7 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon whenever I'm not traveling, and to really sort of dedicate that amount of time so that every day when I wake up, the imaginative part of my brain knows what to do because it's used to doing it every day at the same time, right? It's all just muscle work for me.
Is it also fun for you to diversify a little bit? Because you have your novels, I know you write poetry, and then I know you have this book coming up called Stamped, which was a book that you actually rewrote to make it sort of more accessible. And it's about issues of race and racism. And I'm looking forward to that because I think it's such a heady concept for so many people.
Sure.
And I'm excited to see how you're able to bring it down. So is that fun for you to just keep kind of diversifying within the literature space as well?
I think if it's not fun for me, it ain't fun for you. My job is to always push myself to be better, to push myself to contribute more, right? All of us are just putting extra bricks in the wall, right? I'm never going to build a castle. I just want to be a contributor to said castle, right? And so I'm very careful about what I do and what I work on, what my name's on, what I produce. Everything is very thought out, I'm very particular about all of these things. And so absolutely, diversity and diversifying my career is important, but really it's just about me making sure that I'm always challenging myself so that I'm always challenging the reader.
Why was the stamped book one that you wanted to be a part of?
I think that we have a rare opportunity to give the historical context of how we made it here today. This is the definitive history of race in America from the 1400s to today. It isn't about how to fix it per se. It's just about contextualizing why it is the way it is in this particular time.
I think specifically I'm looking forward to that because obviously we learn history in school, but I didn't learn Black history until I sought it out in college. And I feel like a lot of people have that relationship with Black history and how it intertwines with American history.
How it is American history.
How it is American history. So looking forward to that. When can we expect that?
In March.
March. Okay, cool. Before we go, we do have some questions.
Let's do it.
Who has the first one?
Hey, how's it going?
How are you, man?
I was just wondering, with a novel that kind of approaches this vignette style, when do you feel you've reached the appropriate amount of stories and that they feel complete in their nature?
So that's a fantastic question. You know what, man? There's two things. Number one, I don't know. I just always trust my gut, man. It's never led me wrong. I think all of us have an intuition, and we should spend more time sort of strengthening that thing, right? The way that we talk about like our skill and our craft, we have to spend just as much time making sure that we know how to listen to ourselves, right? Because it's art, right? Like most of it is coming out of you, right? It's all inside out, right? So I chose 10 because 10 felt right. It just felt like it's a nice round number, right? It was like, let's do 10. That sounds right. And then I sort of figured out, well, if I do 10, because I like to contain myself, I like to create constraints because within constraint comes freedom. And so I said 10, let's do 10 stories, 10 pages a pop. Right? Let's see if you can do it. Now, did I stick to that? Did I stay within a 10-page framework? No, because sometimes stories require more or less, but that's the way I kind of entered into the space, saying to myself, you have constraints. And within these constraints, you can backflip, you can somersault, you can do all the twirls and pirouettes you want within the confines that you set for yourself, and creativity becomes a lot more palpable, and it sort of jumps in a different way. And that's just the way I do everything. I say, well, how do I feel? And then what are the constraints? So that my feelings don't spiral into like nothingness, right? Tangential nothingness. How do I feel? What are the constraints? And then let's get busy with that, Yeah.
On that note, of the 10 chapters, is there one that you most identify with or that was written sort of more true to who you were at that time?
They're all kind of bits of me.
Yeah.
It's all sort of my stories, my friends, I think, oh gosh, the story about Satchmo, who's running from the dog, that's real, because really it's all about, is there really anything to be afraid of? We create the monsters and the beasts in our mind. We create the boogeyman so often, and we create escape routes for the boogeymen that don't exist, which takes so much energy. Right? And I think that's a part of my life, right? Somebody who suffers from anxiety, like real deal, clinical anxiety, that's a real part of my sort of mental space. So that one would probably be the one.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because when I was reading it, it made me anxious. Reading his plans, I was like, man, just walk home.
Just walk home.
Just go home. But I get it. One more.
Hello. What advice would you give to writers that are aspiring to be published authors?
So this question is always like such an important question, and I always want to take it seriously. But my answer is going to feel so cheap. And so I want to say that before I say it. The truth of the matter is that there's no magic. It's like you got to read, you got to write, and I know that I wish there were more to say, but it really just boils down to being as good as you can be and making a thing that is as good as it can be. And after that, there's sort of just logistical things, right? Like you've got to query an agent. And I always tell people the best way to do it, this sort of secret cheat code that I tell people is just Google poets and writers and just type in poets, writers, agents. And what will come up, hit number 1 will be Poets and Writers Magazine and the list that they put out every single year of every active agent working and their specialty so that you can go through and find the ones that will work for your kind of work and then start querying. All right, that's my secret tidbit for you. All right.
That's a good tidbit. And your book is full of tidbits and things to sort of munch on and think about, and I really did enjoy it. I really am hoping you go all the way with the award. Shortlisted is an honor, but I really did love this book, and I know that your fans and new fans are going to love it as well. If you guys want to check it out, look both ways. A Tale Told in 10 Blocks is available now wherever books are sold. Put your hands together for Jason Reynolds. Thank you.